Hello, welcome to part 3 in my Sequential Growth Series. My name is Allie with Amory Speaks, and as titled, this is the third video in a in a series that I'm doing on sequential growth and organic math. If you haven't seen the previous videos, part 1 and 2, I would definitely suggest watching those before you watch this one. If you have the time and are interested in this kind of stuff, I would even suggest listening to my sort of in-between filmings, podcast sessions, where I'm doing some brainstorming and some sort of, ground clearing, a little bit of working definitions on things like organic math and sequential growth and why and how we can just learn all these things from nature just by observations, and that they sort of speak plainly as plain truth out there in organic life. And then why I think it's important, all these kind of things. I've done a couple of videos already and a lot of talks about that, so if you're not new, you're probably dead bored of me going over these things. And so with everybody's sort of attention and time in mind, I hope to just jump into this second point of view that I'm going to talk about today. So if you've missed the first point of view, you can go back and watch that video. You can watch it after if you'd like to. I would suggest watching them before and come back to this later, but to each their own. You're here now, so hey. For all of those who have been watching, and for myself, we're here. So just as a quick recap, I just want to go over this sort of two different presentations that this series will be a part of. The first and foremost section about sequential growth is speaking on how the energetics moves, how the numbers move through different flow patterns. And each point of view that we can watch energy move through, grow through, and take form through, those in themselves actually are sequential phases. And we can call it densities, dimensions. They reside within both of those, I believe. They have different application points into the whole of reality. And I think that the levels, layers, dimensions, densities sit inside of each other. And so each one has an integral impression that's made upon the ones that are before and after it. And from 1 to 9, each number actually, so whether or not you're actually, next to the number or not, but each number in the container of the 1 through 9 delineation of the whole, they are all integrally integrated and have connectivity and transactions that happen between them. There's conversation, language, and fluency between all of the numbers. And I talked a bit about that in the point of view of the linear model in the last video. So I won't go too redundant into that, but just to say that what I'm talking about here first is how we view energetics moving through these stages. After that, I'm going to talk about the numeric values of each number, what they're doing as they move through the stages, because they have their own phase that they help to move through these stages. And then we'll talk about the full length of sequential growth and what is happening as with energy and the numbers and the production happening when both the flow and the energetic information are taken into account together. But I think what I'm doing here is trying to sort of separate them out first and foremost so that we can see how they mirror each other in fact, and also learn more deeply about the true laws of positive productivity and growth. And so this is, I've shared these notes over on YouTube community tab and over on Telegram, so you can bring them up, click on them. My writing, I did not write these intending to share, but also I haven't had the great chunks of free time to go and turn my chicken scratch into an online like PDF or something with Canva that is a little bit more readable, you know, friendly to all eyes. but this for now will do, because it's very simplistic. And first and foremost, the sequential flow that we're going to go through in each point of view, I sort of talked about this in the last video, but just as a basic recap, we have first as in the linear, right? And this is again, I'll sort of hold this up. We have number one, which is the linear, right? And it's a single point of connectivity, a single dot. I have these different ways to view it here as like dots for each number, but then also we have what's happening with the energy. I think this segment is going to come in very helpful when we try to translate the organic model over to things like computer technology when we're ready. But right now, I mean, computer technology is so focused on binary control mechanisms, it could never be set free. It will never be set free in the model that we see right now and in the world that we have in front of us. It's not compatible, but it is completely compatible with organic real life and with positive growth that would happen if we were ever allowed to come together in positive system organizations. But anyways, so we have linear, we have sequential as in the staircase. This is what we're going to talk about today as the second point of view. The third is the spiraling. The fourth is the circle. The fifth is the lemniscat, the figure eight or the infinity sign. The sixth is the teredo. The seventh is sacred geometry. It's tetrahedron, the dodecahedron, the understanding about how, I call it the geometric point of view, but it's the understanding of the metaphysical geometries that actually take form. Understanding that the formation is the accumulation of these steps and the energy coming through all of these more simplistic versions to build out the complexity that we see with geometry. Now, 8 and 9 are non-physical points in space. And what I've written here, 8 connects all of these dots. So if you see my dots, 6 and 7. 6 is like our classic, is it a tetrahedron? The Star of David, you know. And when we put that 7th dot in the middle, it creates how you could see it, more dimensionality, right? Having that center point inside of understanding about what the Star of David, what the tetrahedron is, that center dot adds the dimensionality, adds the geometry to it. It's the master on top of all of it, understanding how they all come together. The outside of the container comes together, and the importance of all of the different perspectives of how you can view a shape based on how close or how far away from it you are. And not just distance, proximity as in physical space, how close you are to understanding something, how close you are to feeling something. This is the depth of proximity that comes in when we remember body, mind, and spirit are 3 different layerings, 3 different truths that each have an integral part in every system. Every system has a layer that reflects those 3 workings. Hence the Trinity and the Triad of creation, which is not the end-all be-all. It's not the top. It's number 3. We still have plenty more to go after 3. So this is another thing. People kind of cap off on numbers, cap these things like the Trinity or the number 3 or the number 6, or they sort of say that they're just this thing, and that's the end-all be-all of them. And they don't get to interact with the others and change. But everything interacts with other and changes, so that we can't hold things in this stagnant state. It's not real. It's inorganic, and it's an artificial manipulation of free energy. And why are we doing that? Why are we putting mental constraints on things that want to grow? You know, or that show us by their speaking their own truth that they're part of many others and that there's other things to them. So anyways, 8, when 8 comes together non-physical, it sort of recognizes the internal space and the external space around the geometry that's been created, around that geometric thinking. What's the area? What's the volume? That's what number 8 is karmatically remembering, holding together, and signifying. The sort of the worth, the intangibility of it, the karmatic repercussions, the retributions that come, through working. Because nothing is, we see these things and we want to stick them stagnant, like a picture image, like they stay like that forever. But it's not the case. The image appears because things over time keep coming back to that. It's not that it's actually literally stays that way forever. And 9 in itself, again, is intangible. It's non-physical. It's the boundary. It is the linkage between all of the numbers, and it's the great 1 and 9 coming together and setting that boundary with creator consciousness, saying, this is the thing, this is it. So that's sort of a recap about the flow of energy, how energy comes together to manifest and create a whole thing. When I talk about numeric values and we get into that sequential growth of a certain thing, then we'll see how things are built up, how things manifested, and see that thing moves through all of these shapes, all of the energies. We'll see different points of view of looking at that container of information, whatever the thing is that we've determined to be the 1 through 9 that we're looking at, the whole. And so I say all that to say that the meanings that I'm bringing through and talking about the organization of energy and a point of view of looking at a thing, the meanings are slightly different than the deeper meanings that we'll get into with numeric values. They lean into each other and they work really well with each other in these great partnerships. But there's some differences, and we'll notice, and I'll go through it later, about how certain shapes get tagged to certain numbers. And then we think they only work with that number, like say the lemniscat and the figure 8 and the number 8 and infinity. All of these always a lot of times come together, and 8 will be a representation of infinity, of karma, of the ever-standing looping, of the passing back and forth of these sort of polarity points. And that's a really well-known, definition of the number 8. And so when we look at things like this in a point of view, and I put the lemniscat 8 at number 5, people be like, oh, wait a minute, isn't that what happened with 8? And 8 should be that. And at different angles and times of day in different places and spaces, that number 8 does mean that and can reflect that. And it's totally logical and reliable and truth-based to entangle the two and to get meanings from them. But it doesn't negate or take away from the way that we can look at the lemniscat infinity symbol here for 5 and for stage number 5. And I'll get into that and talk about how the numbers actually build this shape. And when they build the shape, the numbers come into, you can see how they fit the model. But just for now, just to say that sometimes some of the things can seem a little convoluted or a little bit like they cancel each other out or something. But stick with me, and I think you'll see, like I see, how these things actually do come together. And I say that from my own learning experiences, because a lot of times certain chunks of information come to me, and based on the way and the perspective that I look at the information at first, it wouldn't make sense to me. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, that's going against what I think I thought I knew here. Do I need to come back here and untangle all this? Did I get something wrong here? But the more that I learn about this chunk of information, I realize, whoa, I just wasn't seeing fully. I had on colorblind glasses or something. And so when I finally realize I have colorblind glasses on and take them off, I see the whole document and I missed a bunch of things in it, because I didn't have or maybe put them on and I didn't have them, so now I put them on, whatever you want to look at as that sort of metaphor. But coming to things with different knowledge and at different times really helps to comb out and untangle some of those knots or distortions that I thought were incorrect at the first point. So if you're feeling like that, and I'd love to hear too if you have questions or any things that seem incorrect. I'd love to hear about them. Not to, I might correct myself, I might not. I like to have different points of view anyways. Kind critiques. Anyways, now we're 15 minutes into the video and I haven't even gotten to the second point of view. So classic. But sometimes, even for myself, it's very helpful to rehash and go over things. So anyways, with giving sort of an outline of what's to come and where we've been, let's jump into the second point of view today. The sequential point of view I see as sort of a stepping stones or a staircase sort of model. And it builds itself off of the linear point of view. And so we see each number, instead of, like I noticed with the measuring stick, it's like each one really just goes into the next one. There's not any space between allowed in the linear view. It's too far away. It has to be that way. But when we get into the secondary point of view, we're a little bit closer. And so we see actually it's not just completely straight. It's like this. And there's this gap, a choice and a change and a chance in between each number. And I think it's really helpful to look at it sort of with a second dimensionality to it, adding in height to length, as of course our second dimension tells us is true. But also, what does that mean when we add height to a thing? And depth. We add a chance to go upwards or downwards. And the number two also showcases us about duality and opposing parts and commonalities as well. That sort of sidekick, best friend angle comes in to the number two, right? And so in the second point of view, each stage in the phases becomes a step up. It becomes a apparent and conscious journey. And it requires you to have this choice point of polarity within yourself. And when I speak about polarity, I mean about intentional choices, about negative or positive intentions. Are you intending to grow out into external space and see what you might meet there? Or are you looking to dig into your own space and make that more secure to sort of barricade yourself from the external space around you? And depending on the seeking and what you're desiring from the external world around you, whether you choose to align with it and lean into it and allow, or whether you want to retreat from it and try to disengage and create your own version of what you think is happening, that sets the tone for the growth. Now, if you're not open and actually seeking external input and actually exchanging honestly and transparently with the external world, you can't ever take that second step up. You can never really go to stage number two, whole number two. What you'll do is work in stage number one and dive into it and add that zero in there, put the decimal point in there and have 1.0. And all of the work that you ever sort of allow yourself to do, it will mirror what you think the stages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 should look like for you in this one position. But you're never actually extending it out to engage and interact with unknown and see what would happen. And because you can't actually release and let go of the control mechanisms, you're harnessing in and holding tight the sort of the magnet repulsion effect that is pushing away from each other. And so you can never bring it together because you don't want to, right? You've made the choice to disassociate. And so like I said, you might dig around, you might go through all the stages and phases your own sort of mind's eye casts down to what stage number 2 would look like. You might even create your own opponents. You might even create your own external world version of it and then bounce those ideas off that internal version like a scientist does in a sterile lab, you know, a vacuum. Those experiments, they have some value for self, but they have zero value for the external world because you haven't even let them go out there yet. And so who's to know how they would react? Yeah, you've got some potential pieces that you have said could possibly happen here, but you've turned a blind eye to the rest of the full scope of potentiality that really sits out there. And you cannot get out of the linear model. You cannot get away from number 1. All you can do is dive down deeper into centimeters and millimeters and nanometers and create out more space that you think you're creating. But you're never getting out of number 1. You've never got past whole number 1. You're in ratios and fractions. You know, it's like when we divide the square in a half, and then you take that half and divide it into a half, and you take that last half and divide it into a fourth, and then into an eighth, and into a 16th. You can divide as small as you ever want for infinity, but you're still inside that original square that you wrote as number 1. And so, you know, it doesn't interact. It's not let free in external space. And so the square never realizes, oh, I'm actually also a rectangle. I'm also the base of a pyramid with triangular sides. You know, the square will never know that it can be made into all these other things because we have chosen it to only be that. And so breaking out of the linear model and getting into the sequential model, it shows us there's movement available. And a lot of times it's not physical movement. It's a mentality. It's a polarity. It's a spiritual change. It's the freedom of choice and free will, fresh air. It's like opening a window in the room. It doesn't change anything in the room, well, unless it's super windy out. But I mean, you know, it doesn't change the room, but it brings in a current of fresh air. It brings in sounds from outside. It brings in a smell. So, you know, something rides in and is allowed to come in, and it impacts the room. Just like a breeze, it would shake everything around the room, you know. Really engaging with stage number 2 and taking that step out into the unknown, it's an intentional thing. Nobody from the outside can even see that, really, even, you know, but you, the creator of the thing, you, the one who has the point of view of how energetics can be moving around, have now opened up your view a bit more and allowing energy to move in see it moving in different ways. And that's huge. And that brings in this staircase idea. Yeah, and point of view 2, we still have A to B. We still have this very sort of segmented section of understanding about what our whole is and how we can get from not having it to having it, or an outline to a final draft. You know, it's still this very much condensed version of a whole that's very apparent. But there's a movement in there. There's a willingness to rise. There's this inside of you. It's almost scary. You know what I mean? You can feel that there's chances to fall. There's chances to there's no safeguard. There's no net underneath you. and that you do these things to see what will happen if, and that's it. There's no limitations and there's no assumptions that come along with it, or you try to free yourself from them as much as possible. Because as you climb the stairs, the height gets to us. I'm doing it. I'm getting there. I'm in there. And it's like, oh, if you think about it too much, then you fall. You know what I mean? This is very apparent in stage number 2. The have and have not, the is and is not, the what I'm doing it, I'm not doing it kind of thing comes into play. And when we hearken into truth, and when we just have fun with it, and when we lean into the actual present moment, we rise and we move through each of these growth periods really well. Because when we learn about numeric value and how to move through the stages, when you're listening and when you're looking through the lens of the observer, the sort of neutral observer, you hear and you see the organic systems at work with more clarity, and it's obvious what's the next steps because they're all plain and clear. But it's the chaos, the confusion, and the static that we don't hear through, that we miss the signs and signals. And if we're stuck down in stage 1 in linear control, we're blocking it out anything because we have to focus on what's in front of us in our little sterile container, and this, you put blinders onto everything else on purpose. But in stage 2, and if we're working intentionally, we will notice these things, and so you will rise and rise and rise through all of those stages with ease and with clarity. And when we do have the second point of view of comfortableness, and we start to go through this we start to see a couple different working projects move through the same flow, and we start to feel our flow as we go up the staircase. The energy and the spirit comes alive in it, and your fluidity and your flexibility also comes into play here. And we'll see this build into the third point of view with the spiral and the helix, which I'll talk about in the next video. But for here in 1 and 2, like I said before, 1 and 2 are short segments. And just like when we go to building out a spiral, or we look at how numbers grow, the first doublings are kind of small. But the bigger the number gets, the larger the doublings become, of course, right? It's exponential. Energy is exponential, and also truth recognition is exponential. And so 1 and 2 are short and small, and they're meant to be viewed from far away. They're meant to be pretty simplistic because straight lines move into curvation. It creates the curve, right? And so these first points of view are tight and small, as they must be, as math tells us, as nature shows us, and they're meant to be that way. They're meant to be kind of cut and dry, and they're meant to be moved through to help with the firm foundation of the movement that comes afterwards. Now, the last thing that I'm going to sort of just put out there for the sequential staircase model in the second point of view is this decision and understanding about the space between each number. And I talked a little bit about this when I talked about the measurements and the number 0, and 0 being like a circle, like a mirror, like a portal, like an eye, like the eye and lens of the observer. And I like to see it like a microscope and telescope option in and out that creator consciousness can put in there. And it's a reminder of unknown change, of mystery, of magic, of anything can happen, of all potentials, and the secondary point of view, it brings it in. It remembers about that. And so there's this sort of mystery in how we get from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. yes, we can always lean back into the structure the linear point of view showed us, and how the numbers really, oh yeah, we're doing 1.1, 1.2. Oh yeah, we're doing 1.01, 1.02, and or whatever. But the I'm losing my train of thought because honestly, I have to pee so bad. I have too much coffee and a half an hour of talking. I'm like, oh my goodness. It's taking my mind straight into my attention. And I don't have pause on here either. So we'll just have to deal with it. But just to say that bringing in that conscious faith of magical math, of what organic math really represents, which is life. It's unknown, it's aliveness, it's surprise, and that the Creator created it to be that way. Really tagging into that is what brings us and lifts us up out of this linear point of view and into the second staircase. And it literally creates that buffer zone for us to rise or fall within. And again, free choice. And what is freedom of choice? And when we look at, the growth model from 1 into 2, it becomes quite clear to us what freedom of choice really means. It's a conscious choice of what we see. We create what we see. And so bringing in God, magic, unknown, humbling yourself enough to know that you don't know exactly where that threshold from 1 to 2 was, but damn, all of a sudden I'm here. I don't really know how I made it from 5 to 6, but I'm alive. I made it through the storm, and here I am. I've gained a lot of perseverance. I have a lot of, I know that I'm stronger because I made it through the survival moment. But it was a blink of the eye. It was a passing out. It was I drowned and I'm saved. It was something unexplainable shifted. Something unspeakable changed within me. I had an epiphany. I had an unlock. I had, all of a sudden, the things that seemed disconnected connected for me. And acknowledging that and giving into that and saying it was higher self, it is God, it is spirit, it is source connectivity that granted me that. Thank you for that. Let's see where I'm at now. Let's look at this with fresh eyes. Let's bring this back to holistically understanding something for the truth in what I see. And then you lean into the numeric values of whatever stage you're in, and you work through the light and shadow aspects of the stage that you're in. And before you know it, you're sent to the next one, And in the second point of view, in the sequential view, it really is sort of like magic. It really is sort of like you're transported into this next step, into this higher step. And it's like the connection between what's happening to leading isn't there completely yet. Again, because the second stage is further away and it's meant to be more compact. It's meant to be jump, jump, jump. And we'll get in, when I get into the next video in number 3, we'll talk about, well, it's not actually a jump, what's happening. Let's talk about what's happening. But each stage is also so full that you can really reside in it and find full truth in there if you're aware and open enough to listening to it. But you can cram yourself into whatever in the stage that you think is. Like if you cram yourself into stage 2 and you're stuck in duality and polarity, everything is a have not. There will be never a middle ground for you because you don't even want to seek it, because what you want to seek is polar opposites. So you're going to get what you want. But with number 2, like if you've ever been in a long-term relationship, or you've had children, or this wanting to make it through a partnership, this wanting to see the best in the other, and wanting to hear their different point of view so that you can gain a different perspective on your point of view. Those are the harmonic, positive repercussions that happen in phase number 2 that really lead us to trusting in what 3 brings forth, which is total newness to what we think we already knew. But yeah, I'll get into that in video number 3. Thanks so much for joining me here for the secondary video. And yeah, if you haven't seen the other ones, I hope you'll watch them. I'd love to hear any feedback about whatever anybody's got. Feel free, leave comments, send me emails. Yeah, I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.